Hi, this is Paul. This is the third of 3 short videos on rationality. And my question is, why doesn't rationality work now? We see these debates, and we all know pretty much how this goes. We sit down, we talk to one another, and I was having a conversation with the guys from Rebel Wisdom yesterday who came out for an interview. And we all know how these debates go. He says his piece, the other guy says their piece. We think what we want. Does anybody ever win? Isn't this how rationality is supposed to triumph? Well, it does triumph that way sometimes, but it certainly doesn't triumph that way all the time. In all fairness, let's talk about the failures of religion, because the celebrity atheists are very eloquent in talking about the failures of religion, and I'd rather not hide from these failures. In fact, as a pastor, you'd have to be a lying pastor to hide from these failures. Whatever you need to do to get in. So people go to the evangelist crusade and they go down the aisle and just as I am, and there they are, and they believe, and then pretty quickly, okay, well now you've got to join a church, and now you've got to stop sleeping with your girlfriend, and now you've got to stop drinking if that's a problem, and now you've got to give up smoking, and now you've got to cut out the porn, and now you've got to start giving money to the church, and now you've got to start doing daily devotions. And you say, now wait a minute, I thought all I had to do was walk down the aisle. This is a bait and switch. And so then people, maybe they'll go along with your program and they'll believe and they'll join and they'll accept and they'll comply and they'll obey. And that's supposed to solve all their problems, right? The assumption is that it will resolve whatever it is that you suffer from or promise to do so shortly. And whether that's depression, ennui, financial troubles, health troubles, anxiety, relational troubles. If you go to a church, you will discover that most of the people have most of these things. In fact, all of the people have something. We've all got something. It promises to resolve them in a personal future. Now, this is in a sense where we part ways with the atheists, because Christians always have the idea that in the next life, all of these things can be resolved. The atheists, they got a much shorter time frame. They got to get it wrapped up by the time we die. Or they just say, your children will benefit from it. Well, what if you don't have any children? What if you don't like your children? Or you just eliminate the illusion of the self. That's more the Eastern approach. If you don't have a self, you won't have problems. Well, there you go. It's it's in a sense a sort of existential suicide. And well, I won't go there. Then you've got the human factor. Because, okay, so someone came down and they've joined your church and they're doing everything right. They've given up the bottle and they're not smoking and they're not sleeping with their girlfriend and they're being careful of their little eyes, what they see, and they're doing everything, and they say, it's not working, Pastor. I'm not happy. And then the pastor can always say, well, you're not doing it right. You're doing it wrong. And Christians wade in with a whole bunch of different things. Well, Jesus hasn't healed you because you don't have enough faith. Or there's a secret sin in your life that you have not confessed. Or at least some Calvinists can blame God because, well, I'm not in charge. God just gave me these things to suffer. Well, what about the rationalist alternative? Because if you deconvert from Christianity and for rationalism, certainly it must outperform religion in terms of achieving the objectives that you want. Now, somehow if you become rational, now here's the thing, you have to do it. And so if the outcomes fail, someone is to blame, and it very well may be you. Unless, of course, you're starting from a bad position to begin with. But it's that, somehow if you become rational, then what? Well, this seems to have the same problem of religion. Do rational people have less trouble in their lives? Do they live longer? Do they get sick less? Well, maybe sometimes, but they don't stave off death. Are they happier? I don't know. A lot of studies say, no, for the most part, religious people are happier. And in fact, part of the claim of rationalists is that religious people should get off their fantasies, their delusional fantasies that are making them happy, and stiffen up and be rational. Well, why? Where's the ought in that? Why ought I be rational? Well, you should do it for the good of the country. Oh, okay. Whatever you did, but failure of religion. Now run this by the rationalist test. This is the same slide I had before. Just mentally insert the word failure of rationality. Whatever you needed to do to get in. Okay, so from now on, I'm going to be rational. How's that going to go? Are you ever going to slip up being rational? Well, you better not. You better watch the alcohol, and you'd better get enough sleep, and you'd better take care of yourself, and you'd better do whatever you can to not get dementia in your old age, because nature is stalking your rationality, and it is going to take it out. It will resolve whatever you suffer from or promise to do so shortly. Will it? Will rationality do that? Will it solve depression, ennui, financial troubles, health troubles, anxiety, relational troubles? Here's kind of an interesting piece of this, however. Religious people can employ rationality. These celebrity atheists, by definition, can't employ religion, so they actually have fewer tools in their toolbox in order to address all of the things that they have in life. And this is something I think about often. I consider myself to be a fairly rational person. Some of you in the comment section might think I am deluded. But I can both think religiously, and I apply reason to religion. I apply reason when I read the Bible. I apply reason to all kinds of areas of my life. Religion doesn't exclude rationality, but this particular hope of rationality excludes religion. And so if you're asking yourself, well, do you want to bring everything to the table you could to address the problems in your life? Now, again, you're employing here both religion and rationality to an extent, and as I mentioned in the previous video, there's an idolatrous aspect to that. But in a sense, when you get rid of religion, you have fewer things to deal with. It promises to resolve them. Well, here's the thing. If you're a rationalist, you're going to die, and then there's a really good blog post that someone wrote. Maybe I'll do a little vlog video after this where someone went into the with Sam Harris. It makes it sound like happiness is a 10, despair is a -10, and death is a 0. But this blog post said, no, and really in that scale, death is null. Null is not a value. It's not 0 because 0 is a value. It's null. And if you're dead and just simply non-existent after that point, then there's no saying it's a 10 or a 0. In other words, death is off the scale. So basically, suicide is just stepping out of the game. Now, the rationalist alternative, again, we begin to run quickly into the problem of tyranny. The rationalist overlords will bring in the eschaton. Okay, at whose expense? You're going to have to suppress natural suspicion. Which rationalist overlord? Tyranny or cooking reproduction, as in Brave New World, seems to be about the only way you're going to do it. And this, again, is another advantage that religion tends to have, because whether or not you believe in the ontology of God, by, in a sense, setting the top of your hierarchy of values above the human food fight, keeps it out of the food fight. And the problem that you have, for example, the kings of Israel, they are always accountable to their God. And so therefore the quality of the God is important in terms of what they are accountable to. So they're always accountable to their God, and their God can never be corrupted, and that in a sense keeps a standard above things. If we look at, let's say, the American political situation, what a democracy, a secular democracy like ours, tends to do is try to sacralize the process. Well, here's the problem we have. People are always corrupting the process. People are always corrupting the process towards outcomes. People are using reason in order to corrupt the process towards the outcome they desire. Now we begin to, again, better understand where reason should be located in terms of this economy of assets or tools that we employ in putting together the world. Now, again, the benefit of an incorruptible, perfect God is that if your human hierarchy gets corrupted, well, you can appeal to yet a higher power to critique the hierarchy. The problem with having your rationalist overlords is that, once again, rationality doesn't really ensure outcomes. Rationality is the chain from the foundation. Well, let's use a kite and string. Rationality is the base upon which you try to build rationality and direct it towards your outcome. So I think this is part of the reason Sam Harris struggles with telos again. Well, what's the telos? What is the good that human beings should strive for? Well, conscious well-being. I think most who listen to that say it's not. In a sense, that's kind of a cultural consensus, and we like to think that, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, we will very quickly sacrifice well-being for meaning. So maybe meaning is the end. Okay, but that's not anywhere near as quantifiable or testable or kind of out there in the ether as mental well-being. And then I watch atheists plea like evangelists. Come to reason. And I'm thinking, well, this is like come to Jesus. Come to reason. Well, okay, but I can use reason and not give up my religion. Maybe they need to set up their own rationalist utopia. Well, here's the difficulty. This has been tried a number of times, and it tends not to end well. Say, well, but they never tried a humanist utopia. That's, in a sense, what Matt Dillahunty fires back at Jordan Peterson with when Jordan Peterson, says, well, this is kind of what the communists tried. No, we're going to establish a rational humanist utopia. I would recommend, well, why don't you start, trying to build your little rationalist churches? Well, you don't have to call them a church, your Sunday assemblies, these things that you've been trying to do to really get things going. But they can't really seem to do that very well. That project, which has been underway for at least a generation, really hasn't come to much. They can't even establish a successful denomination that can rival, let's say, the Mormons. And a lot of rationalists would look at the Mormon backstory as something pretty easy to debunk. I'm not trying to offend Mormons out there, but Joseph Smith is a fairly recent historical character, and there's a lot of digging you can do into the history of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And the humanist assemblies can't get anywhere near competing with the Mormons. Well, what does that say? Well, and then I look at, say, Bart Campolo. His father was a very successful Christian evangelist. I heard Tony Campolo when I was a college student. I was very moved by him. He was a great speaker, as a dynamic speaker, he was a funny speaker, and Bart Campolo deconverts, and I thought, I wonder how he's doing with his project. Well, he's got 54 patrons on Patreon, and he gets publicity in the New York Times that this is a real big deal, but there are thousands and thousands of pastors all around the country. Then religion is going great guns all around the world, but humanism and their attempt to establish an organization and come together to organize themselves and support each other and have community that strengthens their humanist ideals, it's a failure. Well, you might say, well, people are defective. They are naturally religious. Well, are your rationalist overlords going to solve this problem? So what are the answers that you have? Well, we're going to educate them. We're going to educate them out of this. And I would argue that the secular universities have been working this for at least a generation, probably two, trying to educate religion out of the newbies that appear in their sacred halls and teach them that, I'm not going to get into Christian movies like God is Not Dead. But nice university grads and their spiritual but not religious ideas just go out then and they're talking to the universe as to whether they should buy a Verizon phone. And that's when I saw this video in 2012. I thought, this is how people are. She probably has a great university education and she believes in she believes in evolution and she believes in all of these kinds of things. But if you ask her, if she gets into trouble, you know, she'll cry out to the universe. And I see this all the time with people who leave Christianity and organized religion. It's not that they don't become, you know, they become rational. And part of me, you know, when I look at Sam Harris and his spirituality, I look at this and I think, what are you doing with this? What are you trying to compensate with this? Okay, so you find emotional well-being in your meditation. I'm happy for you. You can find emotional well-being in smoking weed and playing with drugs and having sex, and so this kind of then devolves into a sort of, well, a sort of rationalist hedonism. And I think, though, people are just a short step from religion feels good. So I'll be a rationalist, but I'll play in religion on the weekends. Oh, okay. But I'm not sure you're going to be able to keep up your rationalist humanism that way. So thanks, universe. People are defective. They are naturally religious. Well, they've got no one else to trust but themselves and each other. But this kind of leads you back to the community issue. And again, I mentioned this video a while. It's a fascinating video to watch. Melanie Brewster just pleading with the fellow atheists at Skepticon. We have to get together. We have to form communities. We have to support ourselves because religious people do this all the time, and it has measurable outcomes and benefits for them. And this is a huge problem for her. So she's pleading and pleading for this kind of thing, and no, it doesn't happen. So, I have to ask, eschatology, how long are you going to work on this? This project has been going for at least 100, 150 years now, and they have very little show for it. Christianity took only 300 years to begin to conquer the Roman Empire, but rationalism, for all of its institutional and celebrity assets, your product is underwhelming, and I think you inspire a number of people, but it's just hard to live that way. So there you have the eschaton. So these are 3 short videos, just playing around with video link. I guess I could have done them all in one. They all kind of flowed together. Let me know what you think.